The crystal glasses clinked together, sending hollow echoes across the private lounge of Chicago's most exclusive wedding venue. Ronan Caldwell watched as amber liquid sloshed against the sides of his tumbler. He didn't drink much, never had. A clear mind had gotten him where he was, from the streets to the penthouse to the end of freedom. Carter Vaughn raised his glass, his handsome face already flushed from 3 previous toasts, and to Ronan, the last man standing among us. Laughter erupted from the small group of groomsmen gathered in the dimly lit room. Large leather chairs surrounded a mahogany table cluttered with bottles and half-empty glasses. Through the floor-length windows, Chicago's skyline sparkled like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Ronan didn't join a laughter. Tomorrow he'd marry Nancy Sinclair, merging their lives and whether he admitted it or not their fortunes. She came from old money. He built his empire with bloody knuckles and sleepless nights. A match that made the society pages buzz. "Come on, Ronan," said Luca Moretti, sliding closer on the leather sofa. "One real drink. You're giving up bachelorhood forever. Celebrate properly." His Italian accent thickened when he drank, and he was definitely drunk now. "I'll pass." Ronan set down his barely touched whiskey. At 33, he stood 6'2" with shoulders built from years of boxing and weighted workouts. His dark hair was cut expensively short and his blue eyes missed nothing. They certainly didn't miss the way Luca kept checking his phone or how Carter's smile seemed plastered on too tightly. Something fell off, but wedding jitters weren't his style. Nancy was beautiful, intelligent, and came from the right family. The merger he caught himself, the marriage made sense. "Mr. Caldwell," Ronan turned to see one of the venue staff hovering nearby. "Yes, your mother is asking for you, sir." "She's in the garden terrace." He nodded, excusing himself from a group. Carter called after him. "Don't be long. We've got more embarrassing stories to share." More hollow laughter followed him out. The garden terrace was empty except for Lorraine Caldwell, who stood with her back to him. At 57, she remained elegant. Her gray-streaked hair swept into a classic updo that complemented her navy blue evening dress. "Mother," Ronan said, crossing the terrace. "You wanted to see me?" She turned, revealing the glass of wine in her hand and the careful composure of her face. "Ronan, darling, come sit with me." She gestured to a stone bench tucked beneath a trellis of climbing roses that he joined her, noting the unusual tension in her voice. "Is something wrong?" "Issues with the wedding." "No, nothing like that." She took a sip of wine, then set the glass down. "The wedding will be beautiful. Everything is arranged perfectly." Ronan waited. His mother didn't call private meetings for small talk. She placed a hand on his, her wedding ring catching the light from the garden lamps. "Marriage is a sacred thing, Ronan, a commitment that requires understanding and forgiveness." His eyes narrowed. "What are you trying to say?" Lorraine sighed, gathering herself. "Men and women are different. Women sometimes make mistakes, especially beautiful young women like Nancy." "What mistakes?" A cold feeling spread through Ronan's chest. "I've heard things, Ronan. Rumors about Nancy's past, about her behavior with men before you." Ronan's jaw tightened. "What kind of behavior?" "Affairs, indiscretions." She waved a hand dismissively. "But that was before you." "People change when they find the right person. And if they haven't changed," his voice dropped dangerously low, "then a good husband sometimes needs to look the other way." Lorraine squeezed his hand. "Marriage isn't about winning every battle, Ronan. It's about compromise." He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. "You're telling me to ignore infidelity?" "I'm telling you that love requires sacrifice." Her voice sharpened. "Nancy is a good match for you. Her family has connections you need. Think practically." "Practically," Ronan laughed without humor. "A wife who cheats before the wedding will never be loyal after it." "You sound like a child." Lorraine stood, smoothing her dress. "Marriage is about forgiveness, not ego. If a woman strays, there are usually reasons. Perhaps the man wasn't attentive enough." Ronan stared at his mother, truly seeing her for the first time. This was the woman who taught him principles, who demanded excellence, who pushed him to build something from nothing. "No," he said finally, "that's not how I live my life. If Nancy is unfaithful, then you deal with it privately like a man." Lorraine cut in, "not by throwing tantrums and ruining what you've built." They stood in tense silence. The garden's sweet scent at odds with the bitterness between them. "I need to get back," Ronan said finally. His mother nodded stiffly. "Think about what I've said. Some battles aren't worth fighting." Ronan turned and walked away, the unease in his gut growing stronger with each step. With her signs he'd missed. Nancy's late nights with friends, her guarded phone, the way she sometimes pulled away from his touch. He rejoined the groomsmen, but his mind was elsewhere. They were deep in drunken stories now. Laughing too loudly, Carter holding court. Remember when Ronan first met Nancy? Carter was saying he thought she was the waitress. More laughter. Ronan forced a smile, but he was counting the minutes until he could leave. Something wasn't right, and he wouldn't sleep until he knew what. I'm calling it a night, he announced after another half hour of forced camaraderie. Protests erupted around him. It's barely midnight. Carter objected, reaching for Ronan's shoulder but missing slightly. The night is young. And I'm getting married tomorrow. Ronan countered, stepping away. Some of us still have functioning brain cells. Fine, fine. Carter relented, falling back into his chair. Go be responsible. That's our Ronan. As Ronan left, he noticed Carter and Luca exchange a look. Brief but unmistakable. The kind of look men share when they know something others don't. His car waited in a private lot of black Aston Martin. Understated but powerful. Just like its owner. He slid behind the wheel but didn't start the engine immediately. Nancy was staying at the Peninsula Hotel tonight, following tradition that the bride and groom spend the night before apart. He planned to honor that. But now, decision made, he started the car. He had a small gift for her. Anyway, a diamond bracelet to match her engagement ring, a perfectly reasonable excuse for a late-night visit. Traffic was light as he drove through downtown Chicago. The Peninsula's valet recognized him immediately, rushing to take his keys. Welcome back, Mr. Caldwell. Shall I tell Miss Sinclair you're here? No, Ronan said, pressing a $100 bill into the young man's hand. I'd like to surprise her. The valet nodded, slipping the bill into his pocket. Of course, sir. Suite 1706. The elevator ride felt endless. Ronan turned the small jewelry box over in his hands, wondering if he was overreacting. Maybe his mother was just being dramatic. Maybe the strange vibe from his friends was just pre-wedding, nerves affecting everyone. Suite 1706 was at the end of a plush hallway. Ronan approached quietly, the thick carpet muffling his footsteps. He raised his hand to knock, then paused. Voices. Coming from inside the suite, not just voices. Sounds. The kind of sounds that couldn't be misinterpreted. The door wasn't fully closed. Just a crack, but enough. A rookie mistake for people who thought they were being careful. Ronan pushed it open silently. The suite opened into a large living area, dimly lit by a single lamp. Champagne bottles littered a coffee table. Discarded clothing formed a trail leading to the bedroom door, which stood ajar. Ronan moved toward it, every step deliberate. The sounds grew louder, gasps, moans, a woman's high-pitched encouragement he knew before he looked. Some part of him had always known from the moment his mother pulled him aside. But knowing and seeing were different beasts entirely. He pushed the bedroom door open. The king-size bed dominated the room. And on it, tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets, were three people. Nancy, her blonde hair wild around her flushed face. Carter, his best friend, naked and groaning. And Luca, positioned behind Nancy, his hands gripping her hips. Time stopped. Ronan stood frozen in the doorway. The jewelry box cutting into his palm as his grip tightened. Nancy noticed him first. Their eyes locked. But instead of shock or shame, her expression shifted to something else entirely, a smirk. You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony, she said, making no move to cover herself. The words shattered Ronan's paralysis. He moved with the speed and precision that had made him feared in business. 3 strides and he was at the bed. Carter barely had time to look up before Ronan's fist connected with his jaw. The impact was satisfying, bone and cartilage giving way. Carter held blood spraying from his mouth as he tumbled backward off the bed. A tooth skittered across the hardwood floor. Luca scrambled away, hands raised. Ronan, wait. Ronan ignored him. His focus was entirely on Nancy now. He grabbed her left wrist, yanking her forward. The 5-carat diamond ring glittered mockingly on her finger. Ronan, you're hurting me. She gasped, trying to pull away. With one swift movement, he ripped a ring from her finger and threw it directly at her face. It struck her cheek before bouncing onto the bed. You're nothing but a cheap whore. He growled. His voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate the air between them. Nancy's smirk vanished, replaced by real fear as she saw his expression. This wasn't the controlled businessman she'd been playing for months. This was something else, something dangerous. Ronan, you don't understand. She stammered. It was just what? He cut her off. Just a goodbye party. Just one last fuck before settling down. It didn't mean anything. She tried again, pulling the sheet around herself. Modesty suddenly important. Carter was moaning on the floor, trying to stem the blood flowing from his mouth. Luca had backed himself against the wall, eyes darting around for an escape route. You're right, Ronan said, his voice turning cold. It doesn't mean anything. None of this did. He turned to leave, then paused at the door, looking back at the pathetic tableau. The wedding's off. You can explain to your family why. Wait. Nancy scrambled off the bed, wrapping herself in a sheet. You can't just. I just did. He cut her off with a gesture. Keep the ring. It's worth less than I thought. With that he walked out, closing the door softly behind him. No slamming, no further violence. Just quiet, deadly certainty that I in the hallway. He pressed the elevator button with steady fingers. Only when the doors closed did he allow himself a single moment, one deep, shuddering breath that carried the weight of shattered dreams and betrayed trust. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, Ronan Caldwell was composed again. He handed the jewelry box to the concierge. Please return this to the store tomorrow, he said, sliding his receipt across the counter. I won't be needing it after all. The concierge nodded, professional enough not to ask questions. Outside, Ronan declined a valet's offer to retrieve his car. I'll walk, he said, pressing another bill into the young man's hand. Enjoy the rest of your night. Chicago's streets welcomed him with indifferent arms. The city didn't care about broken engagements or betrayed trust. It simply existed, cold and beautiful in its steel and glass perfection. Ronan walked for hours, his mind calculating with each step. By sunrise, he knew exactly what he would do. The gift box felt leaden in Ronan's hand as he walked down the hotel corridor. He'd purchased the diamond bracelet months ago, saving it for the night before their wedding. A matching piece to go with the engagement ring, the ring that now lay discarded somewhere in Suite 1706. His mother's words echoed in his mind as the elevator climbed. Marriage is about forgiveness, not ego. Was that true? Was he supposed to swallow this betrayal? To look the other way when a woman he'd planned to spend his life with was busy spending her body with his closest friends? The doors opened with a soft chime. Ronan stepped out, his footsteps muffled by plush carpet as he approached Nancy's suite. It was nearly midnight, late for a visit, but he needed to see her, needed to confirm that the gnawing suspicion in his gut was just paranoia and not premonition. As he neared the door, he slowed, sounds drifted into the hallway, muffled at first, then clearer as he approached. Laughter, a man's voice pitched low, then a woman's voice, Nancy's voice, saying something he couldn't quite make out. Ronan stood frozen, the gift box crushed in his suddenly tight grip. The door to Suite 1706 wasn't fully closed. A sliver of light spilled through the narrow gap between door and frame. He should knock, announce himself, walk away. Instead, he moved closer and pushed the door open. The suite opened into a spacious living area dimly lit by a single lamp. The remnants of what appeared to be a private party littered the coffee table, empty champagne bottles, half-filled glasses, a plate of scattered chocolate-covered strawberries. A man's tie draped over the back of the sofa. A woman's stiletto heel lay on its side near the entrance to the bedroom. And from that bedroom came unmistakable sounds, rhythmic movements, breathless moans, the creak of a mattress under vigorous use. Ronan moved through the suite like a ghost, each step bringing him closer to a truth he already knew but needed to see. The bedroom door stood ajar. He pushed it open. The sight seared itself into his memory instantly. A photograph burned with acid onto the surface of his mind. Nancy, his fiancée, his future wife, naked and writhing between two equally naked men. Carter on his back. Nancy straddling him, her head thrown back in pleasure. Luca behind her, his hands gripping her waist, his expression one of drunken ecstasy. Time stretched and distorted. Ronan stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to look away from the obscene tableau. His best friend, his groomsman, his fiancée, all tangled together in a betrayal so complete it felt like a physical blow. Nancy noticed him first. Her eyes, glazed with pleasure, suddenly focused and locked with his across the room. But instead of shock or shame, her expression shifted into something altogether unexpected, a smirk. A lazy, satisfied smile that told him everything he needed to know about their relationship. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony," she drawled, making no move to disengage from the men. The words hit Ronan like ice water, shocking him from paralysis into action. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, barely aware of his own movement until he was standing at the foot of the bed. Carter, finally aware of the intrusion, looked up with drunken confusion. "Ro, what are you?" Ronan's fist connected with Carter's jaw before he could finish the question. The impact was satisfying. Solid, meaty final bone cracked beneath his knuckles as Carter's head snapped to the side. Blood in a tooth flew from his mouth as he tumbled backward off the bed, landing in a heap on the hardwood floor. Luca scrambled away, hands raised defensively. "Ronan, wait, I can explain." But Ronan wasn't listening. His focus had narrowed to Nancy, who now sat alone in the middle of the rumbled sheets. Naked and flushed, her perfect blonde hair a tangled mess around her shoulders. "Ronan," she started, her voice taking on a placating tone. "It's not what it looks. Save it." His voice came out as a raw growl. He grabbed her left wrist, his grip tightening until she went. The massive diamond engagement ring glittered under the bedroom lights, mocking him with its promises of fidelity and forever. With one swift movement, he twisted the ring from her finger and flung it at her face. It struck her cheek before bouncing onto the mattress. "You're nothing but a cheap whore," he said. The words precise and cutting that Nancy's smirk vanished, replaced by something close to fear as she registered the cold fury in his eyes. This wasn't the controlled, measured Ronan Caldwell who negotiated million-dollar deals with a smile. This was something else, something primitive and dangerous. "Ronan, you don't understand," she stammered, suddenly pulling the sheet up to cover herself. It was just what he cut her off. Just a goodbye party. Just one last fuck before settling down. It didn't mean anything. She tried again, her voice smaller now. Carter was moaning on the floor, trying to stem the blood flowing freely from his mouth. Luca had backed himself against the wall, eyes darting around for an escape route. "You're right," Ronan said, his voice turning cold and flat. "It doesn't mean anything." None of this did. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway, looking back at the pathetic tableau. "The wedding's off. You can explain to your family why." "Wait," Nancy scrambled off the bed, wrapping herself in the sheet. "You can't just." "I just did." He cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Keep the ring. It's worth less than I thought." With that he walked out, closing the doors softly behind him. No slamming, no further violence. Just quiet, deadly certainty. I end the hotel hallway. Ronan's mind cleared. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, calculated rage that felt almost comfortable. This was familiar territory, the calm planning that followed betrayal. He'd experienced it in business when partners tried to cheat him, when competitors tried to undermine him. He knew exactly what to do. The elevator doors opened and he stepped inside, catching his reflection in the mirrored wall. He looked exactly the same as he had an hour ago. Same expensive suit, same controlled expression, but something fundamental had shifted beneath the surface. When the doors opened again in the lobby, Ronan walked directly to the concierge desk and placed the jewelry box on the counter. "I need this returned to the store tomorrow," he said, sliding the receipt across the marble surface. "I won't be needing it after all." The concierge, a discreet man who had seen a share of late-night dramas in the luxury hotel, simply nodded. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell, will there be anything else?" "No," Ronan said. "That's all." Outside, he declined a valet's offer to retrieve his car. "A walk," he said, handing the young man a $100 bill. "Enjoy the rest of your night." The streets of Chicago embraced him with cool indifference. The city didn't care about broken engagements or shattered trust. It simply existed, sprawling and magnificent in its glass and steel perfection. Ronan walked for hours, each step taking him further from the person he'd been just hours before. With every block, every intersection, every red light and green, the plan forming in his mind grew clearer. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Morning light streamed through the windows of Ronan's penthouse as he methodically packed a single suitcase. Just the essentials, enough for a week away. His movements were precise, economical, like everything else he did in life. His phone, silent sometime around 3 a.m., sat on the nightstand. The screen continuously lit up with incoming calls and messages. Nancy, Carter, Luca, his mother, the wedding planner, dozens of notifications, each more frantic than the last. He ignored them all. At precisely 9 a.m. When the banks opened, Ronan made a single call to his financial advisor. I need liquid assets, he said without preamble. Enough for a month. Cash preferably. Mr. Caldwell, the advisor replied, surprise evident in his voice. Isn't today your plans have changed? Ronan cut him off. I need the money by noon. Can you arrange it? Of course, but no questions. Just make it happen. He ended the call and continued packing. By 10 a.m. His doorbell began ringing incessantly. He checked the security monitor to see his mother standing in the hallway, her expression a mixture of fury and concern. He turned the monitor off and continued his preparations. The landline rang. He unplugged it to AT 11:30 a.m. A knock on the door, softer, more tentative than his mother's insistent ringing. The security monitor showed Nancy still in last night's dress. Mascara streaked down her face. Ronan, please? Her voice came through the intercom when he didn't answer. We need to talk. What I did, it was a mistake. Terrible mistake. Please don't throw everything away because of one night. He stared at her image on the screen. Even now, disheveled and desperate. She was beautiful. The kind of beauty that had blinded him to the ugliness beneath Ronan. Her voice cracked. I know you're in there. Please. I love you. You pressed the intercom button. No, you don't. Her head snapped up, hope flaring her eyes as she looked toward the camera. Ronan, thank God. Please. Just let me explain. There's nothing to explain. He interrupted, his voice flat. The wedding is canceled. I've already called the venue. You can't just cancel. Her tone shifted, indignation replacing desperation. Do you know how many people are flying in? The deposits will lose. What will people say? A small, bitter laugh escaped him. That's what you're worried about? Money and reputation. Of course not. She backpedaled quickly. I'm worried about us. About our future. There is no us. There is no future. His words fell like stones. Go home, Nancy. It's over. You can't mean that. She whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. Everyone makes mistakes. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. Please, Ronan. For a moment, just a moment, he felt something crack in his resolve. Not forgiveness, but a faint echo of what he'd felt for her once. Before last night, before the betrayal, then he remembered the smirk on her face when she saw him in the doorway. You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony. Not guilt, not shame, just smug satisfaction at being caught. Goodbye, Nancy. He released the intercom button and turned away from the monitor. By noon. His financial advisor had arranged the cash. A discreet courier delivered it in a nondescript briefcase. $500,000 in mixed bills, enough to disappear for a while. Ronan finished packing, then sat at his desk and wrote 3 letters, one to his executive team, outlining temporary leadership structure during his absence, one to his lawyer with explicit instructions about the wedding cancellation and any potential legal fallout, and one to the wedding party and guests, a brief direct explanation that the wedding was canceled due to irreconcilable circumstances. No details, no accusations, just facts at 2 p.m. when the guests would be arriving at the church. Ronan loaded his suitcase into his less conspicuous vehicle, a black Range Rover rather than the Aston Martin everyone knew him for, and headed out of the city. He just merged onto the highway when his phone rang again. His mother's number. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. Where are you? Lorraine's voice was tight with controlled anger. The church is full. Nancy's family is beside themselves. You need to come back immediately. No. That's all you have to say. No, her voice rose. Do you have any idea what you're doing? The embarrassment you're causing, the damage to your reputation. I found Nancy in bed with Carter and Luca last night. Ronan said, his tone conversational, both of them at the same time. She didn't even try to deny it. Silence stretched across the line for several seconds. I see, Lorraine finally said, her voice softer but still firm. That's unfortunate. But marriage isn't easy, Ronan. Every relationship faces challenges. Ronan repeated, incredulous. Is that what you call finding your fiancé being fucked by your best friend and your groomsmen the night before your wedding? A challenge? Don't be vulgar. She snapped. I'm saying that these things happen. Marriages survive infidelity all the time. Not my marriage. Not before it even starts. You could have worked through this. His mother's voice rose again. Marriage isn't about running away when things get difficult. It's about commitment, about compromise, about looking the other way. Ronan finished for her. I remember your advice, Mother. I just choose not to take it. You're making a terrible mistake, she warned. Nancy's family has connections you need. This wedding was more than just a marriage. It was a merger. A strategic alliance. Ronan gripped the steering wheel tighter. Then I guess I'm breaking the contract. Send me the bill for damages. This isn't like you. Lorraine tried a different approach. You've always been practical. Strategic. This emotional reaction isn't the Ronan I raised. No, he agreed. It isn't. Because the Ronan you raised would never allow himself to be disrespected like this. The Ronan you raised would never forgive betrayal. Another stretch of silence. Where are you going? She asked finally. Away. I need time to think. In a wedding? What am I supposed to tell everyone? Tell them the truth. Ronan suggested. Or don't. I don't particularly care at this point. You can't just disappear. Lorraine insisted. There are obligations, responsibilities. Watch me. He cut her off and ended the call. The highway stretched before him. An empty promise of escape. But Ronan knew better. You couldn't outrun betrayal. It followed you, festered inside you until you faced it head on that he wasn't running away. He was strategically retreating, gathering his resources, planning his next move because Ronan Caldwell didn't forgive. And he never ever forgot. Miles passed beneath his tires as Chicago receded in his rearview mirror. His phone continued to buzz with calls and messages, but he ignored them all. Eventually, he pulled into a rest stop, removed the SIM card from his phone, and tossed it into a trash can. Disconnected. Untraceable. Free. Back on the highway, he allowed himself a small, cold smile. Nancy thought she'd won. Carter and Luca thought they'd gotten away with it. His mother thought he was being childish and impulsive. They were all wrong. This wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning of something else entirely. AS Chicago disappeared completely from view, replaced by the endless horizon of the American heartland. Ronan felt a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, he knew exactly what he wanted. Not love, not success, not approval, justice, or maybe revenge. Sometimes the line between the two blurred when betrayal cut this deep. Either way, he would have it. And when he was done, they would all understand exactly who they had betrayed. The small cabin by Lake Michigan had served its purpose. For 7 days, Ronan had disconnected from the world, letting the scandal of his canceled wedding burn itself out in his absence. No phone, no internet, no contact with the outside world. Just solitude, cold, lake water, and the steady hardening of his resolve on the 8th day. He returned to Chicago. His penthouse looked exactly as he'd left it, pristine, modern, empty. A stack of mail waited on the kitchen counter, placed there by his housekeeper. He ignored it, heading straight to his home office. The leather chair creaked as he settled into it, powering up his computer for the first time in a week. The news articles appeared instantly. Headlines screamed across his screen: Caldwell Sinclair wedding disaster. Groom vanishes without explanation. Chicago business titan leaves bride at the altar. Society's wedding of the year ends in humiliation. Ronan scanned them with cold attachment. Not a single article mentioned Nancy's infidelity. According to the press, he was the villain, the cold-hearted businessman who got cold feet. Nancy had played the role of devastated bride perfectly, her tearful interviews painting a picture of bewildered heartbreak. His phone rang, a new number, a new device. Only 3 people had this number. When he saw the caller ID, he answered immediately. "You're back," said a woman's voice. No greeting, no pleasantries. I am. Ronan leaned back in his chair. Did you find what I asked for? And more. Eleanor Brooks, Ellie to her friends, had been his first serious girlfriend back in college. Now she was a respected investigative journalist with a reputation for ruthlessness that matched We Need to Meet. This isn't phone conversation material. Tonight, 8 p.m., the usual place. I'll be there. She paused. Ronan, it's worse than you thought. The line went dead. Ronan set the phone down, a grim smile pulling at his lips. Of course it was worse. With Nancy, it always would be. His second call was to Grayson Hale. Unlike Ellie, Grayson wasn't a college connection. He was a former employee, a brilliant programmer Ronan had hired straight out of MIT. Then later bailed out of legal trouble when his hacking activities caught the attention of federal authorities. Grayson owed him, and they both knew it. Boss Grayson answered on the first ring. Welcome back to civilization. What did you find? Ronan asked without preamble. Everything. Keyboard clicks echoed through the phone. Financial records, text messages, emails, social media, DMs, the works. Your girl wasn't just cheating. She was running a full-scale operation. Send everything to the secure server. And Grayson, yeah, boss. I want anything that connects to her, Carter, or Luca, no matter how small, already done. And there's something else, something big about your company. Ronan's grip tightened on the phone. Explain, not on the phone. Grayson's voice dropped lower, face to face tonight. Fine. 9 p.m., my office downtown. Ronan ended the call, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place faster than he'd anticipated. By tonight, he'd have everything he needed to begin the T7:45 p.m. Ronan walked into the library, a small exclusive bar tucked away in a historic building downtown. The place catered to Chicago's intellectual elite, journalists, authors, professors, making it an unlikely spot for business meetings, which was precisely why he and Ellie had chosen it as their meeting place years ago. The matriarch recognized him immediately. Mr. Caldwell, it's been some time. As Ms. Brooks arrived. Yes, sir. The private reading room as usual. Ronan nodded and walked through the main bar area. A few heads turned, whispers followed in his wake, but he ignored them. Let them talk. Soon, they'd have much more to discuss. The reading room was small but comfortable, with leather armchairs, oak bookshelves, and a fireplace that crackled quietly despite the summer heat outside. Ellie sat in her usual spot, a glass of bourbon in hand, a leather portfolio on the table beside her. She looked up as he entered, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. At 29, Ellie Brooks had the sharp eyes of a woman who'd seen too much and a slight smile of one who'd used that knowledge to her advantage. 7 years, she said, raising her glass in a mock toast, and you still know how to make an entrance. Ronan took the chair opposite her. I didn't come back for small talk, you came back for revenge. She leaned forward, setting her glass down. And for what I found, you have every right to it. She opened the portfolio and spread several documents across the table. Nancy Sinclair, she began, tapping a glossy photo of his ex-fiancée, is not just a cheater. She's a professional. This is the third engagement she's broken in 5 years. Ronan's eyebrows rose. 3. Jackson Whitmore, 2022, steel magnate from Boston. Ellie pushed forward in newspaper clipping. Engagement lasted 8 months before an unfortunate misunderstanding led to its dissolution. 3 months later, Whitmore's company faced a hostile takeover. He lost everything. She slid another clipping forward. Then there was David Harrington, 2023, banking family, old money. Their engagement ended when he allegedly assaulted her in a jealous rage. She tapped the headline, Banking heir faces assault charges. Charges were later dropped. But his reputation was ruined. His family disowned him. Last I heard, he was living in a rehab facility in Arizona. And now me. Ronan's voice was flat. Yes, Ellie met his gaze. And you would have been her biggest triumph. The others had money, but you. She shook her head. You have power, influence, a business empire built from nothing. What's her game? Ronan asked, studying the patterns emerging from Ellie's research. That's where it gets interesting. Ellie pulled out more documents, financial records, emails, text messages. Nancy isn't just after money. She's after control. In both previous cases, she managed to secure significant ownership stakes in her fiancé's businesses before the relationships imploded. She pushed forward a legal document with highlighted sections. This was buried in the prenup her lawyers sent to yours last month. Easy to miss among all the standard clauses. But it would have given her voting rights equal to yours in all major business decisions, despite her much smaller ownership stake. Ronan's jaw tightened. He trusted his lawyers to review the prenup thoroughly. A mistake he wouldn't repeat. And Carter and Luca, he asked, how do they fit in? Ah, the dynamic duo. Ellie's smile turned predatory. They're not just her lovers. They're her partners. She laid out more documents, bank statements, offshore account details, business filings. Carter Vaughn has been running investment scams for years. Small stuff, mostly convincing wealthy friends to invest in ventures that mysteriously fail after he extracts his consultation fees. Nothing big enough to attract serious attention, but enough to build a comfortable nest egg. And Luca Moretti is the charmer, the one who identifies targets and makes introductions. He's been investigated twice for fraud in Italy, but charges were dropped both times. Mysteriously, the complainants withdrew their statements. Ronan absorbed this information in silence. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined, not just emotional infidelity, but a calculated scheme to take what he'd built. They've done this before, he said finally. The three of them working together. Ellie nodded at least twice that I can confirm. Though Nancy seems to be the ringleader, the men change. Carter and Luca are relatively new additions to her circle, but the pattern remains the same. Ronan stood, walking to the fireplace. The flames cast flickering shadows across his face, hardening his expression into something almost demonic. And my mother, he asked, is back to Ellie. Was she part of this? Ellie hesitated. I found no direct connection. But what? She met with Nancy's father 3 times in the month before your wedding. Private lunches, no witnesses. I couldn't access their communications. But the timing is suggestive. Ronan turned his eyes cold. You think she knew? I think Ellie said carefully that your mother's always been pragmatic about business alliances. The merger between your company and Sinclair Industries would have been significant enough to overlook her son being publicly humiliated. Ellie spread her hands. You know her better than I do. A tense silence fell between them. Finally, Ronan returned to his seat. What do you want in exchange for this information? He asked. Ellie leaned back, studying him. You know my price. Exclusive rights to the story when it breaks. Every dirty detail, every piece of evidence. I want to be the one to expose them. Ronan nodded. You'll get your exclusive. But on my timeline, this has to play out exactly as I plan it. And how do you plan to do that? Ellie asked, gathering her documents. Nancy's already controlling the narrative. You're the villain in this story, Ronan. Not for long. He checked his watch. I have another meeting. But tomorrow we begin. I'll need you to arrange something for me. What kind of something? Dinner reservations. Somewhere public, somewhere exclusive. Somewhere with a lot of important people who love to gossip. Ellie's eyes widened with understanding. You're going to trap her. I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. Ronan corrected. A chance at reconciliation. A public opportunity to convince me and everyone else that she deserves another chance. And then a cold smile spread across Ronan's face. And then I'm going to destroy her piece by piece in front of everyone who matters in this city. Ellie gathered her portfolio. I'll make the arrangements. When Friday, 8 p.m., make sure the guest list includes anyone who's anyone in Chicago society, especially those who attended our wedding. Ellie stood hesitating. Ronan, I need to ask, this isn't just business for you. Is it? This is personal. It's both. He rose to face her. She didn't just try to humiliate me, Ellie. She tried to take everything I built. No one does that and walks away and skates. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll call you tomorrow with the details. After she left, Ronan remained in the reading room staring into the fire. The flames danced and swayed, mirroring the burning rage within him. But unlike the chaotic fire, his anger was focused, controlled, directed. Nancy, Carter, and Luca had made a fatal error. They'd mistaken his composure for weakness, his success for luck. They'd try to play him, not realizing he'd invented the game they were playing to be why the time he finished with them. They'd never make that mistake again. 9 p.m. sharp. Ronan entered his downtown office building. The night security guard straightened immediately. Mr. Caldwell, we didn't expect you back so soon. Martin, Ronan nodded in greeting. Is Grayson Hale upstairs? Yes, sir. Arrived about 10 minutes ago. I sent him to your office as requested. Thank you. I'll be working late tonight. No interruptions. Of course, sir. The elevator ride to the top floor was brief. When the doors opened, Ronan found his office lights already on and Grayson Hale sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by laptops, tablets, and various electronic devices Ronan couldn't even identify. Grayson looked up, pushing his glasses back up his nose. At 35, he still had the appearance of a college student, unruly hair, wrinkled clothes, and the intense focus of someone who engaged more with code than people. Finally, Grayson scrambled to his feet. I've been itching to show you what I found. Start with my company. Ronan said, closing the office door behind him. What were you talking about on the phone? Grayson's expression turned serious. They were planning a takeover, not just Nancy, her father too. Sinclair Industries has been secretly buying shares through shell companies for months. He turned one of his laptops toward Ronan, showing a complex web of transactions and holdings. They're still about 8% short of a controlling interest, but with the shares Nancy would have gotten through your marriage. Grayson let the implication hang. They would have had enough to vote me out of my own company. Ronan finished, a cold weight settling in his stomach. Exactly. Grayson nodded vigorously. And there's more. I found emails between Nancy and her father discussing plans to replace you as CEO immediately after the honeymoon. Ronan walked to the window looking out at the Chicago skyline, his skyline, the city he'd conquered through sheer will and relentless work. And they tried to take it from him with a smile and a wedding ring. What else did you find? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. Grayson grinned, a manic energy taking over as he moved between his devices. Everything. I mean everything. Text messages between Nancy, Carter, and Luca going back years. Emails to her father discussing their plan. Financial transactions linking all of them. You pulled up a message thread on one screen. Here's where they discuss which of your groomsmen to target. Luca suggested Carter because of his existing resentment issues. Apparently your best friend has been jealous of you for years. Ronan's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched at his sides. Carter had been his friend since college at least. He thought so. And here Grayson continued, pulling up another screen is where Nancy details her strategy for manipulating you, says you're emotionally unavailable but financially perfect. He looked up, suddenly aware of Ronan's darkening expression. Sorry, boss. Just reporting what I found. Don't apologize. I need to see it all. Ronan pulled up a chair. Show me everything. Every message, every email, every plan they made for the next 2 hours. Grayson walked him through the evidence. The picture that emerged was damning, a sophisticated operation targeting successful businessmen with Nancy as the bait and Carter and Luca as her support team. Previous victims have lost fortunes, reputations, and in one case, nearly his freedom due to fabricated assault charges. I've compiled everything into a presentation. Grayson said finally, handing Ronan a flash drive, text messages, emails, photos, financial records, all authenticated and time-stamped. There's also footage from your home security system. Ronan looked up sharply. What footage? Grayson shifted uncomfortably. From your bedroom, multiple occasions over the past 3 months, Nancy bringing Carter and Luca to your place when you were traveling. A muscle twitched in Ronan's jaw. They used my bed. Yeah, Grayson grimaced. Sorry, boss. But it makes for compelling evidence. Ronan pocketed the flash drive. This is exactly what I needed. Grayson, you've exceeded expectations as usual. So what's the plan? Grayson leaned forward eagerly. Corporate takeover, financial ruin, secret offshore account transfers, something more personal. Ronan stood straightening his suit. I want them to feel what I felt. Public humiliation, complete destruction of everything they value. Brutal. Grayson nodded approvingly. And effective. When do we start? Tomorrow. I need you to make some technical arrangements for me. Ronan outlined his requirements: audio-visual setup, remote access to specific accounts, real-time monitoring capabilities. Grayson listened, occasionally interjecting with suggestions or refinements. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. One last thing Ronan said as Grayson packed up his equipment. I need access to Nancy's medical records. Grayson froze. Medical records? That's definitely illegal. Like federal offense illegal. I'm aware of the legalities. Can you do it? Grayson hesitated. What exactly are you looking for? Birth control prescriptions. Recent doctor visits. Anything related to pregnancy. Understanding dawned on Grayson's face. You think she might try to claim she's pregnant? It's a standard play in her handbook. According to Ellie, she tried it with Jackson Whitmore too. All right, Grayson sighed. I can get that information. But we need to be extremely careful with it. Medical records are no joke. Even my skills might not keep us completely hidden. Understood. Get what you can as safely as possible. After Grayson left, Ronan remained in his office, staring out at the city lights. The plan was taking shape, not just revenge, but justice. Nancy, Carter, and Luca had preyed on successful men for years, leaving destruction in their wake. It was time they faced consequences for their actions. His phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. Reservations confirmed. Fleming Steakhouse. Private room with audio-visual capabilities. Guest list being compiled. Need to discuss inviting journalists. Call me tomorrow. Ronan smiled as he replied. Invite everyone, especially business reporters from major outlets. This isn't just a personal story. It's about protecting others from becoming victims. But he slipped the phone back into his pocket. A sense of calm purpose settling over him. The board was set. The pieces were moving. And Nancy had no idea what was coming for her. Friday evening arrived with the perfect dramatic backdrop of summer, thunderstorm rolling across Lake Michigan, sending sheets of rain cascading down Chicago's glass towers. Ronan stood in his penthouse adjusting his tie as lightning flashed outside the windows. His phone rang. Ellie's name appeared on the screen. "Everything is set," she said without preamble. "Fleming's private dining room has been arranged exactly as you specified. The guest list is impressive. Half of Chicago's elite will be there, plus reporters from 6 major publications. And Nancy received her invitation this morning. She called me immediately as expected." Ellie's tone was amused. She was practically giddy. "Thinks this is your way of extending an olive branch." "And the others, Carter and Luca, haven't been invited as pre-instructions. I did, however, make sure they know about the dinner through mutual acquaintances. They're panicking based on their text messages to Nancy." "Good." Ronan checked his watch. "And my mother?" A pause. "She'll be there, though she seemed suspicious when I called." "She should be." "What about Grayson's technical setup?" "Completed this afternoon. The screens are installed. The audio system tested. He's standing by remotely to control everything from his location. Your flash drive has been loaded onto the system." Another pause. "Ronan, are you sure about this?" "Once you do this, there's no going back." "There is no going back the moment I walked into that hotel room," he replied. "I'll see you at 8. The drive to Fleming's Steakhouse took longer than usual due to the storm. Ronan used the time to center himself to review each element of the plan. Timing would be crucial. The evidence needed to unfold in precisely the right sequence for maximum impact. When his car pulled up to the restaurant, a valet rushed forward with an umbrella. Inside, the Matt Riot D greeted him with deferential respect. "Mr. Caldwell, everything is prepared as requested. Your guests have begun to arrive." Ms. Brooks is already in the private room, overseeing the final arrangements. "And Miss Sinclair not yet arrived, sir, but we've been instructed to bring her directly to you when she does." "Excellent." The private dining room was Fleming's crown jewel in elegant space with dark wood paneling, crystal chandeliers, and a wall of windows overlooking the Chicago River. Tonight, however, heavy curtains have been drawn across those windows. Instead, a large screen dominated one wall, currently showing only the restaurant's logo. About 30 people milled around the room, cocktails in hand. Ronan recognized all of them Chicago's business leaders, society figures, influential journalists. They fell silent as he entered, eyes tracking his movement with undisguised curiosity. Ellie approached, stunning in a simple black dress. "Right on time," she murmured, handing him scotch. "Nancy just texted, she's 5 minutes out." "Perfect." Ronan surveyed the room. "Is everyone here?" "Almost." Ellie nodded toward a corner where an elegant older woman stood alone. "Your mother arrived 10 minutes ago. She hasn't spoken to anyone." Ronan's gaze found Lorraine Caldwell, their eyes meeting across the room. She lifted her chin slightly, a challenge, not a greeting. "I'll deal with her later," he said. "First Nancy." A murmur swept through the crowd. Ronan turned to see Nancy Sinclair standing in the doorway, a vision in a tasteful white dress. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders. Her makeup subtle, but flawless. The picture of innocence and grace. For a moment, just a moment, Ronan felt the pang of what might have been. Then he remembered her smirk in that hotel room. And the feeling vanished. Nancy's eyes found his and her face lit up with calculated hope. She moved toward him, ignoring the whispers that followed in her wake. "Ronan," she said softly, reaching for his hands. "I wasn't sure you'd actually be here." He allowed the contact, keeping his expression carefully neutral. "Nancy, thank you for coming." "Of course I came." Her voice dropped to a breathless whisper. "When Ellie called with your invitation, I couldn't believe it. A second chance is more than I dared hope for." "Is that what you think this is?" He kept his tone light, conversational. "A second chance," uncertainty flickered across her face, but she recovered quickly. "I think it's an opportunity for us to talk, to clear the air, to see if there's anything worth saving." He gestured to the gathered crowd. "And you're comfortable having this conversation in front of an audience?" Nancy glanced around, finally seeming to register the number of people watching them. I assumed this would be a private dinner. Nothing about our relationship was ever truly private. Was it?" Ronan smiled thinly. "Why star now?" Before she could respond, he turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. I know my recent behavior has caused quite a stir in our community. Walking away from my own wedding, disappearing without explanation, it's not the kind of conduct expected from someone in my position. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Nancy and I have been given an opportunity. Few couples receive a chance to publicly address our differences. He turned to her, extending his hand. Shall we begin? Confusion flashed in her eyes, but she took his hand, allowing him to lead her to the two chairs positioned directly in front of a large screen. The gathered guests arranged themselves in a semicircle around them. Ronan, Nancy whispered urgently, what is this? What are you doing? Giving you exactly what you wanted, he replied quietly. An audience. He nodded to Ellie, who pressed a button on a small remote. The lights dimmed and the screen came to life. Before we discuss our future, Ronan addressed both Nancy in the crowd. I think it's important to understand our past. Specifically, the events that led to my decision to cancel our wedding. Nancy stiffened beside him. Ronan, this isn't necessary. Oh, but it is. He turned to the audience. Many of you have heard rumors. Some of you may have formed opinions based on Nancy's interviews, or perhaps stories from mutual friends. Tonight, I'd like to provide some clarity. The screen changed, showing a security camera feed of the Peninsula Hotel corridor. The date and timestamp showed the night before their wedding. The audience watched as Ronan approached Suite 1706, paused at the door, then entered. Nancy grabbed his arm. Stop this, she hissed. This is private. Nothing about what you did was private, he replied, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. You made sure of that. The video continued, now showing Ronan entering the suite's bedroom. The camera angle mercifully obscured the explicit details of what was happening on the bed, but the identities of the three participants were unmistakable. Gasp echoed through the room. Nancy's face drained of color. The audio kicked in crystal clear. You're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony. Nancy's voice laden with smug satisfaction. More gasps. Someone in the back of the room swore loudly. Ronan gestured and the video paused. This is what I found tonight before our wedding. My fiancé in bed with my best friend and one of my groomsmen. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Nancy sat frozen, her face a mask of horror. Of course, this could be dismissed as a one-time mistake. A moment of weakness. Lord knows. That's what my mother suggested. Ronan glanced at Lorraine, who stood rigid with fury. But I discovered it wasn't a mistake at all. It was part of a pattern. A carefully orchestrated plan. The screen changed again, now showing text messages between Nancy, Carter, and Luca. Messages discussing their plan, their previous targets, their strategy for manipulating Ronan. Nancy, he's perfect. Rich, powerful, and emotionally unavailable enough that he won't notice what we're doing until it's too late. Carter, are you sure about this? Ronan isn't like the others. He's sharp. Nancy, that's why I have you too. Keep him distracted. I'll handle the rest. Luca, what about the prenup? Nancy, already taken care of. My father's lawyers slipped in the amendments we discussed. By the time we return from the honeymoon, I'll have enough control to start the process. Carter. And then Nancy. And then we remove him, sell the company to my father's holding group, and split the proceeds as agreed. Same plan, bigger prize. With each new message displayed, Nancy seemed to shrink smaller to chair. The crowd's whispers grew louder, more indignant. This isn't just about infidelity. Ronan continued, his voice cutting through the noise. It's about fraud, conspiracy, a deliberate attempt to take control of my company through deception and manipulation. He gestured and the screen changed again, now showing financial documents linking Nancy to similar schemes with previous fiancés. Jackson Whitmore's ruined steel company, David Harrington's disgrace and disinheritance. Nancy Sinclair has done this before, Ronan announced. Multiple times with different men, each time following the same pattern gained their trust. Arrange a marriage, insert hidden clauses into legal documents, then orchestrate a scandalous breakup that leaves her prey financially and socially ruined. The crowd was silent now, stunned by the evidence unfolding. You can't prove any of this. Nancy finally spoke, her voice shaking with rage and fear. These could be fabricated, edited. This is nothing but character assassination. Every document, every message, every video shown tonight has been authenticated by multiple sources, Ronan replied calmly. The originals have been provided to journalists from the Chicago Tribune, the Wall Street Journal, and 4 other publications. He nodded toward a group of people frantically taking notes. Their stories will run tomorrow morning, complete with expert verification of all evidence. Nancy stood abruptly. This is insane. You're twisting everything because you're hurt. Because your ego couldn't handle. Handle what, Nancy? Ronan cut her off. Finding you in bed with 2 other men or discovering that you plan to steal my company. She turned to the crowd, suddenly aware that her reputation was crumbling before their eyes. This isn't true. None of it. Ronan is disturbed, controlling. He couldn't handle that I had male friends. So he created this fantasy of conspiracy male friends. Ellie stepped forward, holding up her phone. Is that what you call it? Because in these messages to Carter, you refer to him as your side piece. She turned to the crowd. I have thousands of similar messages, all verified by digital forensic experts. When anyone like to see more, the room erupted again, this time with angry voices directed at Nancy. She backed away, looking desperately for allies, finding none. Why are you doing this? She demanded, turning back to Ronan. If you wanted to end things, fine. But this public spectacle is exactly what you deserve. Ronan finished for her. You didn't just try to hurt me, Nancy. You've been hurting people for years. This ends now. She stared at him, calculation replacing fear at her eyes. Then abruptly, her demeanor changed. Her shoulders slumped, her expression crumbling into one of devastation. I made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice breaking. One night of weakness. I was scared about the wedding, about commitment. But I never wanted to hurt you, Ronan. What we had was real. I loved you. I still love you. A few sympathetic murmurs rose from the crowd. Nancy sensed the shift, pressing her advantage. These messages, these documents, they're being taken out of context. My father's business dealings with your company were separate from our relationship. Carter and Luca, that was a mistake. A horrible, terrible mistake that I would give anything to take back. She stepped toward Ronan, tears streaming down her face. Please, if there's any part of you that still cares for me, don't do this. We can walk away from each other quietly. We can what, Nancy? Ronan asked softly. Pretend it never happened. Move on with our lives as if you didn't try to destroy mine, as if you haven't destroyed others before me. He nodded to Ellie, who pressed another button on her remote. The screen changed again, now showing a hospital record with Nancy's name at the top. These are your medical records from the past 6 months, Ronan said. Notice anything interesting? The color drained from Nancy's face as she recognized what she was seeing. Monthly prescriptions for oral contraceptives, Ronan continued, turning to the confused audience, filled regularly, including 3 days before a wedding. Interesting choice for a woman supposedly planning to start a family immediately after the honeymoon, as she told me repeatedly. Nancy's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. How did you get those? That's private medical information. That's illegal. Many things are illegal. Nancy, fraud, conspiracy, attempting to manipulate stock ownership through deceptive practices. Ronan's voice remained calm. Would you like to discuss those crimes instead? She fell silent, shocked, giving way to cold fury as she realized the depth of her defeat. Ladies and gentlemen, Ronan addressed the room again. I didn't bring you here tonight for entertainment, though I realized this must seem like quite the spectacle. I brought you here as witnesses. As people of influence in the city, you deserve to know the truth about Nancy Sinclair, Carter Vaughn, and Luca Moretti before they targeted anyone else in our community. He turned back to Nancy, who stood rigid with humiliation. You can go now. I believe we've said everything that needs to be said. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, with a look of pure hatred, she grabbed her purse and strode toward the door. This isn't over. She spat as she passed him. You'll regret this. No, Nancy, Ronan replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. This is very much over. For you, for Carter, for Luca, and for your father's plans for my company. As of this morning, I've purchased every available share of Caldwell Industries stock, closing the loophole your father was exploiting. Your game is finished. She paused at the door, hand on the knob, back straight with wounded dignity. Then, without another word, she walked out. The room erupted in conversation as she left, shocked exclamations, hurried questions, journalists frantically making calls. Ronan stood in the center of it all, accepting handshakes and expressions of support from people who, just hours ago, have believed him to be the villain of the story. Across the room, he caught his mother's eye. Lorraine Caldwell stood apart from the crowd, her expression unreadable. She gave him a single curt nod, then turned and walked out. Ellie approached, handing him a fresh drink. That one exactly as planned. Not quite, Ronan replied, taking a glass. I expected more resistance, more denial. The evidence was too overwhelming. Ellie gestured to the journalists, huddled in a corner, comparing notes. By morning, Nancy Sinclair will be the most notorious fraudster in Chicago society. No wealthy man will touch her again. Good. Ronan watched the crowd, their shocked expressions turning to righteous indignation as they processed what they'd witnessed. Phase 1 complete. Phase 1. Ellie raised an eyebrow. There's more. Ronan checked his watch. Carter and Lucas still need to understand the consequences of their actions. And my mother, he took a drink. My mother and I have unfinished business. Do you need my help with any of that? He shook his head. You've done your part. The story is yours as promised. Exclusive coverage of tonight's events, plus all the evidence for follow-up articles. The biggest story of my career. Ellie smiled, worth every minute of research. As the evening wound down, guests departed in twos and threes, eager to spread the news throughout their social circles. Ronan stayed until the last of them had gone, sitting alone in the empty dining room, savoring the quiet after the storm. His phone buzzed with a text from Grayson. Nancy just called Carter and Luca. Major meltdown. She's blaming them for everything. Recording the call for your records. More ammo for Phase 2 to Ronan's mild as he responded. Perfect. Begin preparations for tomorrow. Carter first, then Luca. Dottie pocketed the phone and stood, straightening his suit. The night had gone well, better than expected. Nancy's reputation was destroyed. Her scheme exposed. By morning, her name would be synonymous with fraud and deception throughout Chicago's business community. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The others still needed to face their reckoning. And they would, one by one, until justice was complete. Ronan's car pulled up to the Peninsula Hotel precisely at noon the next day. The same hotel where he discovered Nancy's betrayal just over a week ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on him as he handed his keys to the valet. Welcome back, Mr. Caldwell. The young man said, a new respect in his voice. News traveled fast in Chicago, especially scandal involving the city's elite. Thank you, Thomas. Ronan checked his watch. I'm meeting someone in the lobby bar. Has Ms. Sinclair arrived yet? The valet's eyes widened slightly at the name. Yes, sir. About 10 minutes ago. Excellent. The lobby of the Peninsula was a study in understated luxury, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, plush seating arranged for both privacy and visibility. The bar area occupied one corner, separated from the main lobby by elegant columns and strategic lighting. Nancy sat at a small table near the back. Her posture rigid, her expression guarded. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the dimness of the bar, a failed attempt to disguise her identity or perhaps to hide the evidence of a sleepless night. She didn't rise when Ronan approached. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said, her voice brittle. I was surprised by your call. Ronan took the seat across from her, signaling to a waiter. After last night, I assumed you'd be on the first plane out of Chicago. Is that what you want? She removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes. For me to disappear, why won't stop maturing to you long ago? If it ever mattered at all, the waiter arrived. Ronan ordered a sparkling water. Nancy already had a martini in front of her, half empty. You've destroyed me, she said after the waiter left. Are you satisfied? Is your revenge complete? Not quite. Ronan studied her, noting the slight tremor in her hands, the smudged makeup she tried to hide. Carter and Lucas still need to understand the consequences of their actions. They already do. Carter's girlfriend left him last night after your little presentation went viral in certain circles. Lucas been fired from his firm. She took a long drink from her martini. They're blaming me, of course. As if I forced them to participate. You didn't force them, Ronan agreed. They made their choices. This is you made yours. Nancy set her glass down with more force than necessary. Why did you agree to meet me? To gloat? To watch me grovel? You requested this meeting, Nancy. State your purpose or I'll leave. She stared at him for a long moment. Calculation and desperation warring in her eyes. Then, unexpectedly, her expression softened. A single tear slid down her cheek. I wanted to tell you in person, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm pregnant. Ronan. He didn't react. Didn't speak. Just watched her with steady eyes. I found out 3 days ago. She continued, reaching for his hand across the table. I wasn't going to tell you after everything, But it's your child, our child. And despite what you think of me, I couldn't keep that from you. Still, Ronan said nothing, allowing the silence to stretch between them. Say something, she urged, squeezing his hand. I know this changes things. I know you hate me right now. But this is your baby, Ronan, your heir after everything you've built. Don't you want someone to pass it all to? Ronan gently extracted his hand from hers. How far along are you? Hope flickered in her eyes. 6 weeks. It happened that weekend in New York when the fertility conference weekend. Ronan nodded. Convenient timing. It wasn't planned, she insisted. But maybe it's fate. A reason for us to at least try to work things out. For the sake of the child? Yes. Nancy leaned forward earnestly. I'm not asking to get back together. Not after everything. But we could co-parent. We could give this baby the family it deserves. Ronan signaled the waiter again. Could you bring my briefcase from the code check, the black one, tag number 47? The waiter nodded and hurried away. Ronan. Nancy's voice held a note of uncertainty. Did you hear what I said? I'm carrying your child. I heard you. You met her gaze directly. And I don't believe you. Her expression hardened. You think I lie about something like this? I think you'd lie about anything if it served your purpose. The waiter returned with a sleek black briefcase, which Ronan placed on the table between them. You've done it before, haven't you? Claimed pregnancy to manipulate a situation. Nancy's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Jackson Whitmore. Ronan entered the combination and opened the briefcase. You told him you were pregnant too. Didn't you, right after he discovered you'd been cheating? According to his statement to Ellie, you claimed the baby was his, that the other men meant nothing, that you could still be a family. Color drained from Nancy's face. That was different. I thought I was pregnant then. It turned out to be a false alarm, a convenient false alarm that bought you enough time to transfer significant assets into your name before the relationship imploded completely. Ronan removed a folder from the briefcase. And now you're trying the same tactic with me. No, she whispered, real fear entering her eyes. This is different. I have the test results. I can prove it. I'm sure you can. Ronan opened the folder. Home pregnancy tests are remarkably easy to fake. A drop of apple juice can create a positive result. Or perhaps you bribed a lab technician for falsified paperwork. You've certainly done more elaborate things in the past. You're being paranoid. Nancy snapped. Anger replacing fear. This is real. Ronan, I'm carrying your child. Then you won't mind taking another test. He slid a small box across the table, a pharmacy pregnancy test still in its sealed package right now in the hotel bathroom. I'll wait. She stared at the test, then back at him. This is insulting. I don't need to prove anything to you. Actually, you do. Ronan leaned forward. Because if you're lying about this, Nancy, what happens next will make last night look like a gentle warning. The threat hung in the air between them. Nancy's fingers twitched toward the test box. Then withdrew. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. I came here in good faith to tell you about your child, and you're treating me like a criminal. You are a criminal. Ronan's voice remained calm. The evidence presented last night proved that beyond doubt. The only question now is whether you're adding perjury to your list of offenses. Nancy stood abruptly. I don't need this. I don't need you. I'll raise this child myself. And when it's old enough to understand, I'll make sure it knows exactly what kind of man its father is. Ronan didn't rise. Instead, he pulled another document from the folder and placed it on the table. Do you know what this is? He asked conversationally. Nancy glanced down, then froze. Her name was clearly visible at the top of the medical form. This is your prescription record from Walgreens Pharmacy. Ronan continued, showing regular monthly refills of your birth control medication, including, he pointed to a date highlighted in yellow, 3 days ago after you claimed to have discovered your pregnancy. How did you? Nancy began, then stopped herself. Those records are private. You had no right. Many things are private, Nancy, the security of my home for instance, which didn't stop you from bringing Carter and Luca there while I was traveling. Her face contorted with rage. You bastard. Sit down. Ronan said quietly, we're not finished. Something in his tone compelled her to obey. She sank back in her chair, eyes darting around the bar as if seeking escape. Here's what's going to happen. Ronan said, his voice low but intense. You're going to admit right now that you lied about being pregnant. You're going to apologize for attempting to manipulate me yet again. And then you're going to leave Chicago and never come back. Nancy laughed, a harsh, brutal sound, or what, you've already destroyed my reputation. What else can you possibly do? I can press charges. Ronan's expression remained impassive. Fraud. Conspiracy. Attempted corporate espionage. The evidence presented last night wasn't just for show, Nancy. It's been provided to the state's attorney's office as well. All color drained from her face. You wouldn't. I've already begun the process. The only reason you're not in handcuffs right now is because I wanted this conversation first. You can't prove intent. She whispered, though her confidence was clearly shaken. It's your word against mine. It's your words against you. Ronan tapped another document in the folder. Your text messages. Your emails. Your documented history of similar schemes with other men. The false pregnancy claim is just the final nail in a very solid legal coffin. Nancy stared at him. Real fear in her eyes now. What do you want from me? I told you. Admit the lie. Apologize. Leave Chicago. And the charges will be held in abeyance as long as you comply with certain conditions. Stay away from me, my company, and anyone associated with either. Never attempt a similar scheme again with anyone else. Ronan closed the folder. Violate any of these conditions and the full weight of the law will come down on you immediately. Nancy sat in silence, weighing her options. Finally she spoke. Her voice barely audible. I lied. I'm not pregnant. Why? You know why? Her eyes met his, defiant despite her defeat. It was my last card to play. My last chance to salvage something from this disaster. And if I had believed you, if I'd taken you back, a bitter smile twisted her lips, then I would have had a convenient miscarriage in a few weeks. Tragic, but no longer binding you to me. Meanwhile, I'd have had time to secure some financial compensation for my emotional distress. Ronan nodded, unsurprised by her candor now that deception was no longer an option. You never loved me, did you? Would it matter if I said I did? Nancy reached for her martini and drained it. Would it change anything? No, but I'm curious. She set the empty glass down. You were a means to an end, Ronan. A very attractive, occasionally interesting means to an end. But love. She shook her head. That was never part of the equation. Thank you for your honesty. Finally, Nancy gathered her purse, preparing to leave. Are we done here? Have I performed my required penance? Almost. Ronan reached into his pocket and removed a small digital recorder. I just need to make sure we have your confession on record. Her eyes widened as she realized their entire conversation had been recorded. You manipulative son of a careful, Ronan cut her off. Remember who taught me how this game is played? Nancy stood, dignity warring with fury in her expression. I admitted the lie. I apologized. I agreed to leave Chicago. Is there anything else you require? Mr. Caldwell, just one thing. Ronan rose to face her. Know that if you ever attempt to contact me again, for any reason, what happens next will make today seem merciful by comparison. She held his gaze for a long moment, searching for weakness, finding none. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Ronan watched her go, feeling not triumph, but a cold satisfaction. The pregnancy lie had been predictable. Ellie's research had shown it was Nancy's standard tactic when cornered. Having it confirmed, recorded, and neutralized completed another piece of his plan. His phone buzzed with a text from Grayson, watching through hotel security feed. Beautiful takedown, boss, ready when you are for the next phase. Carter's girlfriend received the flash drive an hour ago. His world is imploding as we speak. Ronan smiled as he replied. Good. Keep monitoring. I want real-time updates on both Carter and Lucas' situations and prepare for the final meeting with my mother. That needs to happen today. As he gathered his briefcase and prepared to leave, Ronan glanced around the elegant hotel lobby. A week ago he'd walked through these same doors, planning a future with a woman he thought he knew. Now he walked out having exposed her true nature to the world. Phase 2 was complete. Nancy had been thoroughly discredited. Her latest manipulation exposed and documented. Carter and Luca were facing their own reckonings as their past misdeeds came to light through strategic information leaks. Only one piece remained. His mother, the woman who told him to look the other way, to accept betrayal as the price of maintaining social and business connections. That conversation would be the most difficult of all, but it was necessary to complete the circle of justice he'd set in motion. By nightfall, everyone who had played a part in his humiliation would understand exactly what it cost to betray Ronan Caldwell. Carter Vaughn's penthouse apartment overlooked Millennium Park, a view he'd bragged about at countless dinner parties. This morning, however, he wasn't admiring the scenery. He paced the length of his living room, phone pressed to his ear, voice rising with each circuit. "She's not answering, damn it." He hurled the phone onto the couch. "Third time I've called in an hour." His girlfriend, Melissa, sat calmly at the dining table, her laptop open in front of her. "Maybe she's busy," she suggested, her voice oddly flat. "Or maybe she's avoiding everyone after what happened last night." Carter ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand. If Nancy talks to the wrong people, if she makes a deal, Melissa looked up from her screen. What kind of deal would Nancy need to make Carter? Something in her tone made him pause. He turned to face her, really seeing her for the first time that morning. Her expression was cool, detached, nothing like her usual warm smile. "What's wrong?" he asked, a note of unease creeping into his voice. "I received an interesting package this morning." Melissa reached beside her laptop and held up a sleek black flash drive. "It was waiting at the front desk when I went for my run." Carter's stomach dropped. "What's on it? Why don't I show you?" She tapped a few keys, then turned the laptop to face him. Down on the screen was a video. Carter and Nancy in a hotel room, laughing as they counted stacks of cash. The date stamp showed it was from 6 months ago. "That's not what it looks like," Carter said immediately, taking a step toward her. Melissa held up a hand. "Stop. Just stop." She clicked to another file. "Is this not what it looks like either?" A text message thread appeared. Messages between Carter, Nancy, and Luca discussing their project and how much they stood again when the Caldwell job was complete. "Carter, once we're done with Ronan, we'll have enough to disappear for good. No more small cons, Nancy. Focus on keeping him distracted. I need at least 2 more months to get all the paperwork in place. Luca, what if he catches on Ronan's not stupid? Carter, that's why we're doing this my way. He trusts me, has for years. He'll never see it coming. Melissa, I can explain. Can you really?" She clicked to another document, a bank statement showing transfers from accounts belonging to people Carter had introduced her to at various social events. People he convinced to invest in his exclusive opportunities. "These are all fake, right?" Melissa's voice shook slightly. "This is some elaborate prank or someone trying to frame you." Carter said nothing, his mind racing for a plausible explanation. Finding none. "Who sent this?" he demanded instead. It came with a note. Melissa pulled a small card from her pocket and read. "Ask Carter about the Whitmore deal and the Harrington setup. And what was planned for Ronan Caldwell." It signed a concerned friend. Ronan. Carter whispered, cold realization washing over him. "He's behind this." "So it's true." Melissa stood backing away from him. "Everything on this drive, the scams, the fraud, the plan to ruin your supposed best friend. It's all true. It's complicated." "No, it's really not." She slammed the laptop closed. "I've already forwarded copies to my email and to the police." "You did what?" Carter lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Let go of me," Melissa said quietly, her eyes hard. Now the intercom buzzed before he could respond. Carter released her arm and stalled to the wall panel. "What?" "Mr. Vaughn," the doorman's voice came through. "There are 2 gentlemen here from the SEC. They're asking to speak with you immediately." Carter froze, his face draining of color. "Tell them I'm not here." "Sir, they have a warrant and the police are with them." The room seemed to spin around him. This couldn't be happening. Not so quickly. Not all at once. "Carter," Melissa's voice sounded distant now. "What did you do?" His phone rang, his actual office line. Not the burner he used with Nancy and Luca. With shaking hands, he picked it up from the couch where he'd thrown it earlier. "Hello, Vaughn," the gruff voice of Harold Belmont, his boss at the investment firm, filled his ear. "My office." "Now, I can't, Harold. There's a situation." "I know exactly what the situation is." Harold's voice was ice cold. "The SEC is currently going through your files. They've already found enough to open a formal investigation. Those files are private." Carter protested. "They need a warrant." "They have one. And the firm has been cooperating fully." A pause. "We've also been conducting our own internal review. The irregularities in your client accounts, the unauthorized transfers, it's over, Vaughn. Clean out your desk by the end of the day. You can't fire me. I made this firm millions. You've stolen millions, Harold corrected. And as of this morning, you're no longer employed here. Security is waiting to escort you out when you arrive. The line went dead. Carter stared at the phone in disbelief. Melissa, he began, turning to his girlfriend, but she was already gathering her purse and keys. I'm leaving. She said simply, don't call me. Don't text me. We're done. You can't just go. We need to figure this out together. There's no way anymore. Carter, she walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. And there's nothing to figure out. You're a fraud. Everything about you is a lie. That's not true. He protested. What we have is real. Melissa laughed. A hollow sound void of humor. I don't even know who you are anymore. She opened the door. Good luck with the SEC, sounds like you'll need it. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than any slam. Carter stood alone in his expensive apartment, his perfect life crumbling around in piece by piece. His phone buzzed with a text unknown number. He opened it to find a single message. Never bet against the house. Or across town. Luca Moretti sat in the trendy cafe where he conducted most of his business meetings at 42. Luca had the easy charm and Mediterranean good looks that allowed him to talk his way into or out of almost any situation. Almost. Mr. Pierce should be here any minute. He told the waiter, ordering another espresso to buy more time at the table. James Pierce, CEO of a tech startup flush with venture capital funding, was Luca's latest target, a potential investor in what Luca had described as a revolutionary blockchain platform for luxury goods authentication. The fact that no such platform existed was a detailed Luca plan to explain much later, after the initial investment had been safely transferred to offshore accounts. His phone buzzed with a message from Nancy. It's all falling apart. Carter's being investigated. We need to talk now. Luca frowned, typing a quick response, meeting important investor. We'll call after. Stay calm. 3 dots appeared as Nancy typed. Then there won't be an after, you idiot. Ronan knows everything. Everything. Check your email. Anxiety prickling at the back of his neck. Luca opened his email app. The most recent message was from an anonymous address with a subject line. Your past, present, and very limited future. He opened it to find a detailed dossier, his own, containing records of every scam, every fraud, every scheme he'd run over the past decade, bank statements showing money transfers, email threads discussing targets, photos of him with known criminals in Italy, and most damning of all, a recording of him explaining to Carter exactly how they would help Nancy take control of Ronan's company. We get him drunk at the bachelor party. His own voice said clearly, slipped something extra in his drink. By the time he wakes up, Nancy will have photos of him in compromising positions with the girls we hire, just enough leverage to make him sign whatever she puts in front of him. Luca's hands shook as he closed the audio file. The email had been sent not just to him, but CC to the FBI, the SEC, Interpol. And he felt sick as he noticed every client and investor in his contact list. Mr. Moretti. A voice broke through his panic. Luca looked up to see a middle-aged man in an expensive suit standing beside his table. Mr. Pierce. Luca recovered quickly, rising to shake the man's hand. Thank you for meeting me. Please sit down. Pierce remained standing. Actually, I don't think that will be necessary. I received some very interesting information about you this morning. Luca's smile faltered. Information, documentation of your past, business practices. Pierce's expression was stone cold, including your recent work with Nancy Sinclair and Carter Vaughn. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Pierce cut him off. Just an elaborate fraud that's been exposed. He nodded toward the cafe entrance. Those men would like to speak with you. Luca turned to see 2 men in dark suits approaching his table. Their expressions grim, badges visible on their belts. This is a mistake. Luca said quickly, gathering his things. I have to go. I wouldn't. Pierce advised. Running will only make it worse. But Luca was already moving, heading for the back exit. He burst through the kitchen, ignoring the protests of startled staff. And out into the alley behind the cafe. He'd gone 3 steps when a black Range Rover pulled up, blocking his path. The driver's window rolled down to reveal Ronan Caldwell, watching him with cold amusement. Going somewhere. Luca, Ronan. Luca forced a nervous smile. This is all a big misunderstanding. I can explain. No need. Ronan's voice was calm, conversational. I understand perfectly. You, Nancy and Carter plan to destroy me, take my company, ruin my reputation. That was Nancy's idea, not mine. Luca protested. I was just along for the ride. You know how she is. I know exactly how all of you are. Ronan interrupted. That's why I made some calls this morning. The SEC is very interested in Carter's creative accounting. The FBI has some questions about your activities across state lines. And Interpol has reopened those fraud cases in Italy. Luca felt the blood drain from his face. You can't do this. We were friends. Were we? I've been wondering about that. Ronan tilted his head, studying Luca with detached curiosity. When did it start? When did you first decide to betray me? It wasn't like that. Luca insisted, aware of footsteps approaching from the cafe. Nancy approached us with the plan. She said it would be easy money, that you'd never even know that I'd never know my fiancé and my supposed friend were laughing behind my back. Using my bed while I was away, planning to take everything I've built. Ronan's expression hardened. You're right. I wasn't supposed to know. But now I do. The back door of the cafe banged open and the two men in suits emerged. Mr. Moretti, one called. We'd like to ask you some questions about wire fraud across state lines. Luca looked from the agents to Ronan, panic rising in his chest. Help me, he pleaded. For old time's sake, I'll disappear. I'll never contact you again. Goodbye, Luca. Ronan rolled up his window as the agents approached. Enjoy Italy. I hear their prisons have improved since the last time you narrowly avoided them. The Range Rover pulled away, leaving Luca alone with the federal agents and the ruins of his carefully constructed life. In his rearview mirror, Ronan watched Luca being handcuffed and led to a waiting car. No satisfaction, no joy, just the cold certainty that justice was being served. Carter facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges. Luca looking at extradition and multiple fraud counts. And Nancy, her reputation destroyed, her schemes exposed, her future prospects reduced to nothing. Phase 3 of his plan was nearly complete. Only one conversation remained. The Caldwell family estate stood on 2 acres of prime lakefront property north of the city, a stately colonial that had been the family for generations. Ronan's child at home, though he hadn't thought of it that way in years, he parked in the circular driveway and sat for a moment, preparing himself. Of all the confrontations he'd faced in the past week, this one would be the most difficult. The front door opened before he could ring the bell. Lorraine Caldwell stood in the doorway, elegant as always in a simple navy dress. Her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat chignon. I was wondering when you'd come, she said, turning to lead him into the house without waiting for a response. Ronan followed her to the sunroom overlooking the garden where tea had been set out on a small table. Everything precisely arranged, perfectly controlled, just like his mother herself. Sit, Lorraine instructed, taking her own seat. We have much to discuss. Ronan remained standing. Yes, we do. His mother sighed, pouring tea into a delicate cup. Your public evisceration of Nancy Sinclair was unnecessary. There were more discreet ways to end the engagement. Discretion wasn't the goal. Clearly, Lorraine's expression tightened. You've made a spectacle of our family. The calls I've received, the questions, the thinly veiled inquiries about how I'm holding up, it's humiliating. More humiliating than finding your fiancé in bed with your groomsmen the night before your wedding. Lorraine set her cup down carefully. I understand you were hurt. Hurt? Ronan cut her off. You think this is about hurt feelings? Nancy, Carter, and Luca were planning to take everything from me. My company, my reputation, my future. And you, he paused, studying her. Did you know? She met his gaze unflinching? Not the extent of it. But I suspected Nancy wasn't being entirely genuine in her affections. And you pushed for the marriage anyway. I pushed for a strategic alliance, Lorraine corrected. The Sinclair family connections would have opened doors for you, for us. Personal happiness is secondary to building a legacy. Ronan laughed, a short, harsh sound. That's always been your philosophy, hasn't it? Sacrifice everything personal for the sake of appearance, for social position, for the family name. It's how this family has survived for generations. Survived but not lived. Ronan finally sat across from her. Tell me something, Mother. Did you know about Nancy's past? The other man she's destroyed? Something flickered in Lorraine's eyes, discomfort. Perhaps even guilt. I'd heard rumors. Nothing concrete. Rumors you chose to ignore when you advised me to look the other way if I found out she was cheating. His voice hardened. Tell me, was it worth it? This strategic alliance that would have stripped me of my company and left me humiliated? That was never my intention. Lorraine's composure slipped just slightly. I wanted what was best for you for your future. No, you wanted what was best for the callable name. There's a difference. Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken accusations. Outside, the garden swayed in a gentle breeze, roses nodding as if in agreement. I've seen the evidence, Lorraine said finally. What you presented at the restaurant. The records Ellie Brooks compiled. The text messages. She looked down at her hands, folded precisely in her lap. It seems I misjudged the situation. Coming from Lorraine Caldwell, this was as close to an apology as anyone ever received. Ronan waited, watching her internal struggle play out in the slight tightening of her mouth, the barely perceptible furrow between her brows. Nancy wasn't what I thought. She continued, each word seeming to cost her. Her intentions toward you, toward the company, they were worse than I anticipated. Yet you told me to forgive her sight unseen, to look the other way if I discovered her infidelity. Ronan leaned forward. Why, mother? Why push me towards someone you suspected would hurt me? Lorraine stood abruptly, moving to the window. For a long moment, she gazed out at the garden, her back straight, her shoulders set with familiar tension. Your father cheated, she said finally, her voice so quiet Ronan had to strain to hear multiple times over many years. I discovered it early in our marriage. Ronan stared at her, speechless. His father, the paragon of Caldwell virtue, the man whose portrait still hung in the main hallway, whose business principles Ronan had studied and emulated, that man had been unfaithful. Why didn't you leave him? Ronan asked, finding his voice. Leave? Lorraine turned, genuine surprise on her face. And go where? Do what? I was 26 with no career, no independent means, and a young child. Divorce wasn't an option in our social circle, not then. So you stayed and said nothing. I stayed. I built a life within the constraints I was given. I made the best of the situation. Her voice took on a familiar lecturing tone. That's what adults do, Ronan. They compromise. They adapt. They don't throw tantrums and walk away when things become difficult. Is that what you think I did? Through a tantrum, you canceled a wedding at the last minute. You disappeared without a word to anyone. You publicly humiliated a woman from one of the most influential families in Chicago. Lorraine shook her head. Yes, I would call that a tantrum. Ronan stood, anger rising in his chest. Nancy was planning to take my company. She and her father had been orchestrating a hostile takeover for months, using our engagement as cover. The prenup her lawyers sent over would have given her equal voting rights despite minimal ownership. And the night before a wedding, I found her in bed with Carter and Luca, both of them at the same time in a hotel suite I was paying for. Lorraine's expression didn't change. These things happen in marriages. This wasn't a marriage. It was a setup from the beginning. Nancy never loved me. She never intended to be faithful. I was nothing but a target to her, a means to an end. Ronan stepped closer. And instead of supporting me when I discovered this, you tried to convince me to go through with the wedding anyway. I was trying to protect you from scandal. No, you were protecting yourself from embarrassment. From having to explain to your society friends why the wedding was cancelled. Ronan's voice dropped lower. You were doing exactly what you did with father, pretending everything was fine while your world collapsed around you. The color drained from Lorraine's face. For the first time in Ronan's memory, she seemed at a loss for words. I'm not you, mother. He continued more gently. And I'm certainly not father. I won't live my life as a facade, sacrificing my happiness and self-respect for appearances. Lorraine sank back in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 57 years. Only wanted to spare you pain, she whispered, the pain I felt when I discovered the truth about your father by pushing me into a marriage that would have destroyed me, by encouraging you to be practical, to see the bigger picture. She looked up at him, vulnerability showing through her usual mask of control. I truly thought it would be different for you. That Nancy's indiscretions were youthful mistakes, not calculated betrayals. Ronan sat across from her again, studying the woman who had shaped so much of his life, his values, his understanding of the world. For the first time, he saw her not as the formidable Lorraine Caldwell, but as a woman who had made painful compromises and lived with the consequences. I was wrong, she said finally, the words coming slowly as if extracted under duress, about Nancy, about what you should have done, about many things. Ronan said nothing, recognizing how difficult this admission was for her. The evidence you presented at the restaurant, the text messages, the emails, the financial records. Lorraine shook her head. It's clear now that Nancy never intended to be a real partner to you. She saw you as a means to an end. A target. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. I should have protected you from that. Instead, I pushed you toward it. What? Ronan asked softly. Why were you so determined to see this marriage happen? Lorraine's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her teacup. The Sinclair connections would have secured your position in certain circles. Doors that remain closed to self-made men, no matter how successful, would have opened. And she hesitated. Nancy's father offered to resolve some financial difficulties I've been facing. What financial difficulties? Ronan's head snapped up. The family trust is nearly depleted. Lorraine grimaced. Your father made some poor investments in his final years. Investments I continued after his death, trying to recoup the losses. The house, the lifestyle, the social position, it's been maintained largely through careful management of appearances, not actual wealth. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. Pride. She gave a small, self-deprecating smile. The very thing I've accused you of placing above practicality. I couldn't bear for you to know that I failed to protect your inheritance. Ronan absorbed this information in silence. His mother's insistence on the marriage, her dismissal of Nancy's infidelity, her anger at his decision to walk away, all of it made a terrible kind of sense now. Robert Sinclair promised to quietly transfer funds to the family trust if the marriage went forward. Lorraine continued. A wedding gift that would have restored our financial security. In return, I was to ensure that you remained amenable to the marriage, regardless of any complications that might arise. You sold me, Ronan said quietly, to save this house, this lifestyle. I made a mother's choice to secure her son's future. Lorraine countered, though without her usual conviction. Or so I told myself. She set down her cup of the sigh, seeing the full scope of their plan now. I realized I was as much a pawn as they intended you to be. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of truth settling between them. Finally, Lorraine spoke again, her voice steady once more. I was wrong, Ronan, about Nancy, about what you should have done, about the value of appearances over substance. She met his gaze directly. And I'm sorry, truly sorry for pushing you towards someone who meant you harm. Coming from Lorraine Caldwell. This explicit apology was unprecedented. Ronan studied her face, seeing for the first time the toll that decades of maintaining appearances had taken, the fine lines around her eyes, the tightness at the corners of her mouth. Visible signs of a lifetime spent hiding her true feelings behind a mask of propriety. The house can be sold. He said finally, the family name doesn't need a specific address to maintain its meaning. This has been our home for generations. Lorraine protested, but weakly. It's a building, mother. Walls and a roof. The Caldwell legacy isn't in the bricks, it's in what we do. How we live, the principles we uphold. Ronan stood. I'll have my financial team look into the trust situation. We'll find a solution that doesn't involve selling me to the highest bidder. Lorraine Winston is phrasing, but nodded. Thank you. She hesitated, then added, I'm proud of you, you know, for building your company from nothing, for standing up for yourself when I wouldn't. A small sad smile crossed her face. You're a better Caldwell than I've been. Ronan didn't respond to this directly. Instead, he said, I'm meeting Ellie for dinner tonight. She's publishing the full story tomorrow. Nancy schemes, Carter and Lucas involvement. All of it. Eleanor Brooks. Lorraine's expression softened slightly. She always did bring out the best in you. Sharp mind, that girl. Woman, Ronan corrected. She's 29 now. Of course. Lorraine hesitated. Will you tell her about my role in this, about the arrangement with Robert Sinclair? Ronan considered the question. No, he decided that part of the story stays between us. Ellie's focus is on exposing Nancy's pattern of fraud and manipulation, not on family matters. Relief flickered across Lorraine's face. Thank you. As he prepared to leave, Lorraine walked him to the door, her steps slightly less certain than when he'd arrived, as if the weight of truth had physically affected her. Ronan, she said as he stepped onto the porch. For what it's worth, your father would have been proud of how you handle this. He always admired strength, especially in defense of one's principles. Ronan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The image of his father, the man he'd idolized, the standard against which he'd measured himself, have been irrevocably altered today. It would take time to reconcile this new knowledge with his memories as he drove away from his child at home. Ronan felt something shift inside him, not forgiveness. Exactly, but understanding. His mother had made her choices based on her own experiences, her own fears. just as he had made his based on his principles, his refusal to accept betrayal. There were different people from different generations with different values. And for the first time, Ronan truly accepted that fact without judgment. The Chicago skyline glittered against the night sky, visible through the wall of windows in Ronan's penthouse living room. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontations with Nancy, Carter, and Luca. 2 weeks of intense media coverage, legal proceedings, and gradual return to normalcy. Your story has broken every readership record at the Tribune, Ellie said, gesturing with her wine glass. She sat curled in the corner of Ronan's leather sofa, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in years. The editor wants to submit it for a Pulitzer. Ambitious, Ronan commented, refilling her glass. It has all the elements: corruption, betrayal, wealthy socialites, corporate espionage. Ellie took a sip. Plus, the public loves seeing justice served, especially when it involves the rich and privileged. Is that what happened? Justice, you tell me. She studied him over the rim of her glass. Carter's been charged with wire fraud and securities violations. Luca's been extradited to Italy to face charges there. Nancy's social invitations have dried up completely. And her father's company stock has dropped 15% since the revelations. Ronan gazed out at the city, his city. It doesn't feel like victory. What does it feel like? He considered the question, completion, the closing of a chapter, and the opening of a new one. Ellie's voice remained casual, but her eyes were intent on his face. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, then frowned. Problem? Ellie asks Nancy. She's downstairs asking to see me. Ellie sat up straighter. After everything, she's either desperate or delusional. Probably both. Ronan typed a quick message to the doorman. Send her up. You're actually going to see her? Ellie's eyebrows rose in surprise. One last conversation, Ronan said, setting his glass aside to make sure she understands that this is truly finished. Want me to give you privacy? No. Stay. His eyes met hers. Please. Minutes later, the elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Nancy stepped out, a shadow of her former polished self. Her designer outfit hung, slightly loose on her frame. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. And her smile, once dazzling, seemed brittle and forced. Ronan. She stopped short when she spotted Ellie on the sofa. I was hoping we could speak privately. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Ellie. Ronan remained standing, making no move to offer Nancy a seat or a drink. That Nancy's eyes darted between them, calculation visible beneath her attempt of vulnerability. I see. You two have reconnected. Why are you here, Nancy? Ronan asked, ignoring the implication. She stepped further into the room, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. I wanted to talk to you, to explain my side of things. Your side? Ellie couldn't help but interject. You mean the side where you systematically targeted successful men, manipulated them into relationships, then destroyed their lives for profit? Nancy shot her a venomous look before turning back to Ronan. It wasn't like that. Not with you. With you, it started out as his business. Yes. But it became something more. Bear me, Ronan said coldly. We both know that's not true. It is. Nancy moved closer, her voice taking on a pleading quality. I fell for you, Ronan. That's why I got scared, why I acted out with Carter and Luca. I was afraid of how I felt. Ellie made a disgusted noise from the sofa. Nancy ignored her, focusing entirely on Ronan. I know I've made terrible mistakes. She continued, unforgivable ones. I don't expect you to love me again. I don't expect you to trust me. Then what do you expect? Ronan asked, that Nancy's facade cracked slightly, desperation showing through. I need help, Ronan. My father has cut me off completely. My accounts are frozen, pending investigations into my finances. I can't even afford my apartment anymore. Oh, there was the real reason for this visit. Not reconciliation, not explanation, money. You don't have to love me, she whispered, closing the distance between them. But at least help me. Ronan studied her. This woman he'd once thought he knew. This woman he'd planned to marry, to build a life with. This woman who had seen him as nothing but a target, a stepping stone to wealth and power. Do you remember what you said to me? He asked quietly. That night in the hotel room, when I found you with Carter and Luca, do you remember your exact words? Nancy's expression faltered. I was drunk, Ronan. I didn't mean you said you're not supposed to see the bride before the ceremony. Ronan's voice was flat, emotionless, not guilt, not shame, just smug satisfaction at being caught. I made a mistake. No, Nancy, you made a choice, multiple choices over many months. Ronan stepped back, increasing the distance between them. And now you're living with the consequences of those choices. So that's it. Tears welled in her eyes. The whether genuine or calculated was impossible to tell. After everything we shared, you're just going to turn me away when I need help. You told me to get out that night. Ronan said, echoing her words from the hotel. And that's exactly what I did. Nancy's tears vanished instantly, replaced by cold fury. You bastard. You think you've won? This isn't over. It is, Nancy. Ronan's tone remained calm. It's been over since the moment I walked into that hotel room. You'll regret this, she hissed, glancing between him and Ellie. Both of you will. I don't think so. Ellie stood, moving to stand beside Ronan. Your threats don't carry much weight these days. Not with your reputation and tatters and your co-conspirators facing criminal charges. Nancy's gaze hardened as she looked at Ellie. So it's like that, is it? You've been waiting in the wings all this time, ready to swoop in the moment things fell apart. That's enough, Ronan said sharply. Ellie has nothing to do with what happened between us. This is about your actions, your choices. Of course, Nancy's smile was bitter. It's always someone else's fault with you. Isn't it, Ronan? Never your own. I think you should leave, Ronan said, gesturing toward the elevator. Gladly, Nancy gathered the remnants of her dignity, straightening her shoulders as she moved toward the exit. Enjoy your moral superiority while it lasts. We both know you're not as perfect as you pretend to be. The elevator doors closed behind her, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Well, Ellie said finally. That was intense. Ronan turned to look at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth despite the confrontation. Welcome to life with Nancy Sinclair. Even in defeat, she's dramatic. Do you think she'll try something else? Ellie asked, concern flickering across her face. No, she knows it's over. That was her last play. Appeal to my sympathy. Try to extract some financial support. Ronan moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights. Classic Nancy, always working an angle. Ellie came to stand beside him, their reflections visible in the glass. You handled it well. Most men would have wavered at least a little, faced with tears and pleas for help. Most men haven't seen behind the mask the way I have. He turned to face her. I mean what I said to her, it's over, completely over. And what comes next? Ellie asked, her voice soft in the dimly lit room. Ronan studied her face, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the slight curve of her lips, the quiet strength in her expression. They had history. He and Ellie, good history. Unlike what he'd shared with Nancy before, ambition and different paths that separated them. They've been not just lovers, but genuine partners, equals in intellect, drive and values. I don't know yet, he answered honestly. Rebuild, I suppose, focus on the company, take some time to process everything that's happened. Ellie nodded, understanding in her eyes. No rush. Some chapters need time to fully close before new ones can begin. Ronan reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so natural it surprised them both. Thank you for your help with Nancy with the investigation. For being someone I could trust when trust seemed in short supply. That's what friends do. Ellie replied, though something in her eyes suggested she might be open to more than friendship. When the time was right, as they turned back to the view, standing side by side in comfortable silence, Ronan felt the weight of the past weeks begin to lift. Nancy, Carter, Luca, they had tried to take everything from him to destroy what he'd built through years of hard work and sacrifice. They had failed. He still had his company, his reputation, his self-respect. And perhaps when the dust settled completely, he might have something new as well, a relationship built on genuine connection rather than calculation, on mutual respect rather than manipulation. The future stretched before him, uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time since walking into that hotel room and seeing Nancy's betrayal, Ronan Caldwell felt truly free.